All right, thanks for tuning into Tuesday Tips. Today is a little special because we actually went live at noon and we forgot to record. So we're going to do it again. But thanks, we're so glad that you are watching. So if you're wondering who we are Jordan School District's Health and Wellness team. So essentially, we're an interdisciplinary team, and our focus is improving wellness for educators and families and students. And part of our team projects is weekly Tuesday tips, which is one of what you're going to watch. And if you want to visit our website, it's wellness.jordandistrict.org. And then if you have any questions or a topic you'd like us to cover, we'll take any feedback at wellness@jordandistrict.org. So I am going to turn the time over to Annie Larson. She's one of our team social workers, and we're going to tag team today's presentation. My name is Rachel Dangerfield, and I'm a school psychologist. So here we go.
All right. So today we're going to go over the behavior ABC. So just kind of the basics of behavior and function and some possible interventions. The agenda is, again, what are the functions? There's 4 functions of behavior. We'll go over what those are. We'll talk about what the ABCs of behavior stands for, go over some intervention ideas, and then talk about the super important 4-to-1 ratio and why that matters and what exactly that is. So there's 4 basic functions of behavior. Almost any behavior can be traced back to one of these 4 functions. It's attention, escape, tangible, or sensory. So first of all, we're going to talk about attention. Attention, a person might engage in a behavior to gain some form of social attention or a reaction from other people. So for example, a child might engage in a behavior to get other people to look at them or laugh at them or play with them, hug them, or even scold them. So an example might be a child saying something rude to their sibling as a means of getting the sibling to respond. And the sibling might reinforce this behavior with attention by laughing or because they think it's funny, or they may get an angry retort or both. But those are all forms of attention. So attention, can be positive or negative. A behavior might be, if someone's engaging in a behavior with attention as the function, a positive attention isn't the only sustaining force. Negative attention is still attention, and would reinforce that behavior. So in the bottom corner, I put a picture of this singer. He sings that song, Watch Me Whip, Watch Me Nay Nay. And I always think of this song when my kids are looking for attention or whatever, because most of the words of the song are watch me, watch me, watch me. And when I notice a behavior that seems to be a whole lot of watch me, then I can sometimes assume that maybe attention is the driving force. Escape is another function of behavior. So not all behavior is occurring because the person wants to obtain something. It may be that they want to get away from something or just avoid it altogether. So an example would be a student repeatedly getting up to sharpen a pencil when they're given an assignment. So they keep engaging in alternative behaviors to avoid the task. Or a child crying every time they're asked to do something they don't like. Crying inevitably delays the task, and so it works to escape or at least avoid for a time being. Tangible is, so some behaviors occur just so a person can obtain an item or gain access to a desired activity. So someone might scream and shout until their parents buy them a new toy, or scream and shout until they get to go to the zoo. So examples of this would be, we've all seen this, we've all been there as the observer or the participant, a child asking for a candy bar in the checkout line and repeatedly asking and then whining and then yelling and then maybe tantruming, kind of trying to use all the skills they have to get that tangible, or otherwise maybe sneaking out of the bedroom at night to gain access to the iPad. I'm not sure what I'm doing. There we go. Sorry. Sensory. So we have this bear in the corner scratching an itch, right? And that is the function that some behaviors have. If sensory is the function, it's not reliant on an external, anything external. Instead, it's internally pleasing in some way. So the function is to give the person some form of internal sensation that is pleasing, or it removes the sense something that's displeasing. So when we scratch an itch, an example is scratching an itch. So we know that though sometimes scratching an itch might make it worse. If you have a rash and you scratch, you could spread it. Might not be the best course of action, but we get immediate relief, which is super reinforcing. And so it makes it difficult to stop the behavior if we get an immediate reinforcer. Now I need to go back. Thank you. So those are the 4 functions of behavior. And then the behavior ABCs are, kind of how we start to look at behavior and try to understand what's happening. So we see an antecedent, which is what happens directly before the behavior. What's going on in the environment? Are there specific triggers that are occurring right before the behavior occurs? So then the behavior, what does it look like? When we're trying to change a behavior or alter it in some way, it's important that we define what that behavior is. So you want to look at, what exactly is happening? What exactly does the behavior look like? Because when we have that, then we can use our intervention when that behavior is occurring, and it will be much more effective than kind of using it across the board willy-nilly to similar behaviors. So we want to focus on one behavior and define what that looks like. And then the consequence is what's happening right after the behavior. What do we see occurring in the environment? Are they getting attention from parents? Are they getting attention from siblings? Are they getting out of a task? And then is there another consequence that they're, having a timeout or a loss of privilege? But in trying to figure out what's going on, we want to look at these 3 before the behavior, what the behavior looks like, and what's happening after the behavior.
Well, and real quick with consequences, now that I'm thinking about it, a lot of times consequences when we talk about it with behavior, we can get confused with like the punishment, right? And the punishment might play a part with it, but when we look at consequences with behavior, we want to know what's happening immediately after. So before you took away the kid's bike, did you yell at them for a while? That kind of thing. So it's not necessarily like, well, they lost 3 minutes on iPad. That might be, but it's really what happened even probably before that action happened.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right.
So am I doing this one?
Sure.
Okay, I did. Sorry, guys. So then we do the ABCs, we look at the behavior, and then what we're going to do is make a hypothesis and test our hypothesis. So that's just basically, use the information we've gathered and decide what do we think is reinforcing this behavior. So you're going to test your hypothesis by implementing an intervention that fits the function. So our intervention, if the child is gaining attention through hitting their sibling, and they're immediately getting attention from the sibling, and that's what we think is maintaining the behavior, then we need to figure out another replacement behavior, something that we can teach the child to still gain attention, but in a more pro-social way. So Rachel's idea was, teaching some jokes. So your kid has a few jokes that they can tell their sibling, and that way they're still getting that interaction, but in a more pro-social way. So then lastly, trying to target the primary function of the behavior. So we want to look at one behavior at a time, and what do we think the primary function is? Let's start at the root of it. So if a child is itching because they have eczema, but then they're getting yelled at, like if mom is saying, or corrected, please don't do that. Oh, that's going to cause problems. Then we're adding attention onto the sensory function. So we really want to start with the base, and sometimes we can save ourselves a lot of headache going forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Annie. So now that you know about the functions of behavior and how we kind of hypothesize and look at the ABCs to replace that behavior, we want to look at some interventions. So first we're going to talk about interventions for attention. So the first one that you might want to consider is scheduling attention. So how can I take some time, and I might schedule it, to give this child the attention they need? So it might be a special date, or I might help my child work with on their homework. Or attention might be I have their favorite sibling near them when we're in the car, or whatever it might be. Um, another strategy is to increase your proximity to the child. So move them around. That way you can give them the positive attention that they need. And you can also provide a preferred activity. So if you are busy and you can't give them all the attention they want, you can let them have a preferred activity until you're ready to give them the attention that they need. So that's attention. The next we're going to talk about is escape and avoidance interventions. So oftentimes you'll see kids, for example, be given a list of 10 chores that they have to get done on a given day, maybe on Saturday or whatever. And you might see your child melting down and crying and refusing to do the task, right? So that tells us they might be trying to get out of the task. So what can you do? You can adjust the difficulty or the length of the task. So it might be, okay, you know what, you choose 5 chores to do today. And then they get to choose the 5 instead of 10. Or you set them up for easier tasks that are less challenging to them. The other thing that you can try is offering choice. So you can do this or you can do this. So they can choose the order, or where they can complete the task, or what they're going to use for the task. There's a lot of ways that you can offer choice, and kids, especially defiant kids, really respond to choice. Another thing is you can increase their preference or the interest in the activity. So you'll see teachers do this at school. If they find out a kid hates math and the kid's always trying to get out of math, but they find out the kid loves Minecraft, they might provide the child with like a Minecraft worksheet working on the skill that they're working on. Or like in the home, it might look like it's time for dishes. Your child hates doing dishes and is whining and doing whatever they can to get out of dishes. And it could be you let them choose whatever music they want to listen to while they do the dishes. So then it becomes fun that they get to choose the music. The next interventions we're going to talk about are tangible. So that's the access to things. Like oftentimes you'll see, like Annie talked about, kids might sneak out of their room to get an iPad at night, or a cell phone, or even food it might be. So we have something called the Premack principle, or the grandma's rule. And essentially that's, you can have this, the desired thing, if you do this first. So first this, then this. And that can be a really powerful tool. The other thing to do that might be less conventional is to increase accessibility to that object for your child. So say, and this might not be a good fit for everyone, but it is an idea and something that you can use. So say your child really wants the PlayStation. You can make sure that it's scheduled. They always have scheduled time to have that PlayStation, so they won't be as tempted to sneak out in the middle of the night to play the PlayStation, because they know, oh, I get to play it from 4 to 5 tomorrow. You can also use that preferred item as reinforcement. So if you don't sneak out of your room tonight, then you can play the PlayStation for 20 minutes or whatever it might be. So you can use the accessibility of that object to your advantage. The last thing is sensory interventions. So there's not a whole lot you can do, but a couple are to provide alternative sensory reinforcement. So say you have a kid that might be rocking, they rock a lot, you could provide time for them to swing and appropriately use that rocking sensation. Or if you have a child, let's go back to the itching example. So you might have a child that's itching all the time, itching, and they're getting a rash, they're tearing apart their skin. Instead, the replacement behavior would be that they get to rub on lotion or itch cream. So they're still getting that sensory feedback from doing that, but it's a more appropriate manner. And then lastly, you'll just want to enrich their environment. So make sure that they have lots of interesting and stimulating objects and activities that fills all their sensory needs. So now that you have some ideas of interventions and things that you can do to help replace the behavior, we want you to be aware of something called the extinction burst. Essentially, the extinction burst means it's going to get worse before it gets better. This doesn't happen 100% of the time, but it definitely happens a lot when we're working on changing behaviors. So oftentimes when you start focusing on a behavior and you're trying to shape it into a new behavior and replace it with a new behavior, you'll see your kids will dig in their heels. And actually, Annie has a really good example for this.
So yeah, when I was in training and behavior training a long time ago, someone used this example, and I just think it is a perfect example. They talked about, any of us, when we walk into a room, we flip the light switch, the light turns on. If we go into the room and flip the light switch and the light doesn't turn on, almost 100% of the time we will flip it a bunch of times, because that's the behavior that gets the outcome that we're looking for. And so we try that. We will increase intensity and frequency of the behavior first before we are going to change the behavior. So before we're going to go change the light bulb, we flip the light a bunch of times, which is pretty futile, but it is human nature. So it's important that we know kids are just like us. And so if something's been working, they're going to keep using that behavior. And then they will oftentimes, what can be frustrating as a parent or caregiver is that the behavior kind of seems to get worse for a little bit. And that's because when we have a skill that works, we stay on that path. And it's very important that if we're going to intervene, that we're willing to kind of stick it out, because we don't want to teach the child that if you scream loud enough, then you'll still get the same outcome. We don't want to teach them that the increased intensity of the behavior is now the baseline for what it requires to get their need met. And if we are willing to stick it out, we'll see a change in behavior. The other part is that we need to make sure that we're giving a replacement behavior. We want them to still be able to get the outcome that they're looking for. So another way that meets that function, that we're teaching these skills. We're not just expecting that they're going to suddenly act in a pro-social way because we're limiting reinforcement. In my mind, I think of, turn on the light, it doesn't turn on, flip the switch. You might need someone to say, hey, let's get a light bulb. I'll help you. Let's get a ladder. These are the things we need to do. Otherwise, you might end up dragging a bunch of lamps into the room. Well, that's not the most functional, but it works. And so it's important that we really focus on teaching skills and supporting someone as they're trying to gain confidence in these new skills.
Yes, thank you. I like that. That is something that we often lose with behavior, is that a behavior is a skill. So, and it's happening for a reason. So how can we teach the skill that we would like them to use instead? So that's important, because if you don't know you can change the light bulb and all you know is to flip the switch, then you wouldn't know until someone showed you. So I love that example. So the last thing I want to keep in mind is something we call the 4-to-1 ratio. So basically the 4-to-1 ratio is to help maintain positive relationships with parents and children, student teachers, whatever, or you and a coworker, anyone, honestly. But the whole idea behind it is that for every one correction or negative interaction you have with your child, which might just be as simple as, Billy, put your arms down, quit hitting your brother, keep your arms to yourself, you need to have at least 4 positive interactions with that child to counteract the one negative interaction, which it might sound like a lot, but you'll be surprised. As soon as you start getting in the habit of giving all this positive praise, it's not usually a huge deal. And one thing that's important about giving the praise and even the correction is to be specific about what you're praising them for. So say your child refuses to come to the dinner table and eat dinner because they're, I don't know. As soon as your child sits down, thank you for coming to the dinner table. Even if they're not eating, You're being specific. You're labeling the action that they're doing that you are approving of. So using that a lot, and just be specific and be genuine. And you will find that as you use this 4-to-1 ratio, that you will feel better and your child will feel better. It's a lot better, we all know, when we focus on the positive things that are happening. Even with the most challenging child, you can find positive things and let them know. And I just want to close with this quote. So our lovely district behavior specialists always share with everyone in the district this quote. So where attention goes, behavior grows. And that is so true. So if you want more information about this kind of behavior ABCs and things like that, you can visit our district behavior team. We're not on the behavior team, but we work with them and we appreciate all that they do. So they have some resources on their website, which is behavior.jordandistrict.org. And so thank you. Thanks for tuning in and watching us. We hope this has been worth your time. If you are interested, last week we talked about addressing physical needs to increase well-being. And you can catch the recording of that on our website, which is at the bottom here, wellness.jordandistrict.org. Next week, we're super excited. We are actually bringing in some behavior specialists from the district, and they are going to talk about ending power struggles, which I know is a very important skill that we could all use. And like we said before, if you have any questions, comments, or something you'd like us to talk about, you feel free to email us at wellness@jordandistrict.org.